Coming up today here on the Raiders Report, presented by PrizePicks, ESPN just put this Raiders starter on blast. If you don't know, my name is Mitchell Renz, and I'm going to be talking about the article that was released by ESPN breaking down 2026 NFL offseason, veterans on the hot seat after the draft. So the player that ESPN is putting on blast is Isaiah Pola-Mao, and this has been somebody that I have discussed multiple times on this show as being a potential trade candidate because you can see some of the writing on the walls that the Raiders have done. But I do want to be very clear. I am a fan of Isaiah Pola-Mao. I just don't think that the Raiders have done a good job recently using him to the best overall ability, which is something that we talked about a bunch last season. If anybody wants to see this entire article and break it all down, that's the title of the article. But in there, they have a quote that says 14 veterans who might be in jeopardy of a major role reduction, if not a loss of starting snaps outright. And when you see what the Raiders have done, I think that he is going to lose his starting job. And a player that had over 1,000 snaps last season, I don't think he's going to have anywhere close to that this upcoming year. So here's what ESPN had to say, essentially putting Pola-Mao on blast. He played more than 1,000 defensive snaps for the Raiders last season. And while defensive coordinator Patrick Graham has left for Pittsburgh, new coordinator Rob Leonard is an internal promotion. It's rare to see a player use that heavily, get completely benched for a rookie, and to be clear, I don't think that that will happen. But Pola-Mao played 861 snaps at safety alignment last season via NFL Next Gen Stats, largely because of the role of versatile box player was already occupied by Jeremy Chinn. Second-round pick Traden Stukes played a ton of positions in college, but he finished his career at Arizona as a safety, and he was announced by the Raiders as a safety when he signed his contract. He could play the slot, but his body type and play style translate best to a safety, specifically a deep middle safety. That's Pola-Mao's old job. I think the Raiders will end up in some sort of three-safety rotation, depending on how much time Stukes plays at nickel, with Taron Johnson also vying for snaps, and how often Chinn is at linebacker now that Quay Walker and Nakobe Dean are in town. Put simply, there are a ton of snaps up for grabs in what was a poor safety room last season. And Stukes might be just the best player in that group already. He's certainly the future, as both Pola-Mao and Chinn are rising free agents. Stukes might lead the position in snaps by the end of the season. So when I saw this article out there from ESPN, I knew I wanted to be able to discuss it because, again, Isaiah Pola-Mao is a fan favorite, a player that was a UDFA, I think did a lot of the right things to be able to work his spot and find his spot on the roster. But I also know that I'm not the only one last season that was sitting here going, we need a free safety, we need a free safety, we need a free safety, and they didn't do anything about it. So my question to you is this. Imagine you're sitting down in a room with Clint Kubiak, with John Spytek. Is Isaiah Pola-Mao on the hot seat? Do you agree with ESPN or do you disagree with ESPN? My answer is going to be coming up here in just a moment. The reason why I completely agree with Isaiah Pola-Mao being on the hot seat is because actions speak louder than words. And when you see all of the actions that this organization has done, and I mean from the very, very beginning of the offseason, it screams Isaiah Pola-Mao's job is absolutely positively in jeopardy. And I'm going to tell you everything that you need to know around why I agree with ESPN. Before I do, though, huge shout out to today's sponsor, PrizePicks. Get $50 instantly when you play your first $5 lineup. And there's a reason why they are America's #1 sports pick app. It's the place to go if you love daily fantasy sports. Player picks are on the fire right now with playoff basketball getting going, and there's no better place to cash in while watching sports than with PrizePicks. To qualify for a PrizePicks lineup, pick 2 to 6 players, select more or less on stat projections, include points, rebounds, assists, three-pointers, several others across all sports. And if you're more of a baseball guy, you can choose stats such as hits, home runs, and strikeouts. So I am a baseball guy, but I wanted to talk a little bit about this basketball lineup that I decided to cook up here. And I already forget his name. Julian Champagnie, I decided to go the more here on 1.5 assists. And the reason is 4 out of his last 5 games, he's crossed that number, and he's had 3 straight games where he's had more than 1.5 assists. So for that to be a demon pick, I said, you know what, let's roll with it. I go more. For Naz Reid, I took the more on 11.5 points. That's 5 straight games that he's done that. And then Victor Wembanyama, because of the whole ejection, I expect a big game for Wemby, and I took the more there on 10.5 rebounds. But what I also really wanted to show you is the difference between power play and a flex play. So this is a $5 lineup to pay $21.75. You can see the 3 correct pays 4.75. If I decided to do a flex play here, then that $5, it turns into win 15. And if 2 out of those 3 end up happening, then I get my money back. So if you know ball, you can prove it on PrizePicks. And if you plan on watching the Spurs and Wolves game tonight, well then, hey, new users, you're going to be able to get this offer. Download the PrizePicks app today. Use code HMA when you play your first $5 lineup to receive $50 in lineups. That's code HMA when you play your first $5 lineup to get an extra $50 in lineups with PrizePicks. Clickable link is going to be down in the comments and in the description of today's show. Huge shout out to PrizePicks for hooking up Raider Nation. So when I started this show, I said, hey, ESPN, they think a certain player, a certain starter is on the hot seat. And the reason also why I'm making this video is because, yes, I agree. And I think anybody that's watched this show, whether you're watching in May, whether you're watching in April, whether you watched in March, whether you watched in February, I would stand 10 toes down on here, and I've said that Isaiah Pola-Mao is a great player when you play him in the right spot. And if you use him at safety, that's going to be good. But in terms of why he's on the hot seat and why I believe that ESPN has really hit the nail on the head here is because of everything that has happened. Let's first talk about free agency. The Raiders, to me, made it very clear that there was a big concern for them, especially in the secondary. And I bring that up because you got to be able to tip your cap to Spytek. You got to be able to tip your cap to Clint Kubiak. And when they've said that they've had an issue, I think that they've done a good job addressing that issue. And to me, I look at early on in free agency, the very first thing they did, they traded for Taron Johnson right before it started. And then they went out and they re-signed Eric Stokes, that 3-year, $30 million deal. Some of you might go, well, Mitch, you just mentioned a nickel corner and you just mentioned a corner. You're 100% right. However, though, the fact that the Raiders turned their attention to the secondary, I look at secondary and I instantly look at Isaiah Pola-Mao because the biggest issue of why our secondary stunk last season, well, there's a lot of reasons. But I think the biggest reason is we didn't have that true center fielder. You didn't have anybody in the back end, and teams knew that there was nothing that we were going to be able to do about it. So in my mind, yes, I know Isaiah is a safety, but because the Raiders, the first thing that they could do was mix and match, and they could bring in some of those players like a Taron Johnson, like an Eric Stokes, I believe that they did that because they truly looked at that secondary from top to bottom, and they go, we need more guys that can cover. And Taron Johnson and Eric Stokes are helping all the players in that secondary ultimately cover. Let's go to the next reason here why. Yeah, I do think Isaiah Pola-Mao is on the hot seat, and actions do 100% speak louder than words. Unfortunately for Isaiah, this coaching staff made it very clear, Spytek again and Kubiak at NFL owners meetings, that they didn't like the safety room. So they said they didn't like the safety room. And then what did they do? They doubled the F down during the draft, literally, by taking Traden Stukes at pick 38 overall and also drafting his teammate Dalton Johnson in the 5th round at 150. But, like, if you didn't watch the draft, okay, if you didn't watch the draft and if you don't remember the entire draft process, I think it's really easy to just kind of not fully understand the impact of the Raiders going out and getting Stukes because there was a lot of smoke, right? And I always say where there's smoke, there's fire. This time there wasn't any fire. It was all smoke around the Raiders, looking at defensive tackles, looking at the wide receivers. But the fact that there were players like a Christian Miller, a Caden McDonald, a Denzel Boston still on the board, and they said, yep, I hear you loud and clear. And that's after drafting Fernando Mendoza. That's them knowing that they have a need on the trenches on that defensive line. But you know what they did? They said, I want Traden Stukes. And I think when you really listen to a lot of the reports out there, it kind of sounded like that they were all in on Stukes at pick number 38. It's one of the reasons why they got the Texans to trade up. right in front of the New York Giants. And the more and more reports that come out, the Raiders were all in on trading Stukes. So because they were all in on Stukes and they traded up for his teammate Dalton Johnson in the 5th round, that tells me that they had a plan in the offseason to address their secondary and free agency early on, but then to also address that safety room in the NFL draft. Let's go to the next reason here why Isaiah Pola-Mao is on the hot seat, and for good reason. But I still have hope in Isaiah, and we'll talk about that here in a little bit. He had a rough 2025, and there's no other way you can look at it besides it was a really bad year. Now, were the linebackers bad, which doesn't help Isaiah? Yeah. Was the Raiders' defensive line bad? Yep. Well, the Raiders were bad last season. There's a reason why we had the number 1 overall pick. But he is coming off his worst year of his career. 39.8 overall PFF grade. And I want to be extremely clear here. Just because PFF says something is good or bad doesn't mean I think it's good or bad. But my eyeballs, when my eyeballs tell me something and then the numbers back it up, that tells me everything that I need to know. And his 30.2 coverage grade was the worst in the National Football League out of 98 qualifying safeties. And again, like when you're a safety and your team's not able to get any quarterback pressure, or the other problem I think with the Raiders was they just didn't have any depth. So because they didn't have any depth, they're asking Isaiah to go out there and do a position that he's not really capable of playing, and they're asking him to play it over and over and over again. But hey, that's the Pete Carroll Raiders, and that's one of the big issues there. But I do think that SpyTech has realized that he isn't a free safety. And I'm crossing my fingers because, yes, 2025 was rough. But damn it, and this is kind of why I get so frustrated sometimes with the Raiders, and it's because I'm like, how can fans see something? And, this is why I want people to hit that subscribe button because, last year, and raise your hand, type me down below, and if you're already a part of the, if you've already subscribed, shout out to you. But if this is the first time you're watching this video and you felt like as a Raider fan last year, it's not like you didn't like Isaiah Pola-Mao. I think all of us really kind of did like Isaiah. He was a UDFA, and for a UDFA to make a roster despite multiple different coaching changes, again, I'm going to tip my cap to that guy because I know Isaiah is a hardworking player. But it was just another example of us fans feeling that we knew this roster better than the guys that are making the actual decisions. And if you felt that way about Isaiah Pola-Mao, hit that subscribe button. But I also want you to subscribe because now we actually have a flipping coaching staff that I think understands the roster and everything that we're supposed to do with those players, because the job of your roster is to make sure that you're getting the best out of those players. I want y'all to subscribe because I feel like this offseason's different, but Isaiah is definitely one where we said it all last offseason. He's not a free safety, so stop using him at free safety. The other reason, though, why I do want people to hit that subscribe button, and I know I get very emotional on this show, but I get emotional because I care. I care about the Raiders. I care about Raider Nation, and I want people to realize that we are truly so much more than a YouTube channel. So obviously Sunday was Mother's Day, and I saw this comment from Celtic Raider, and it said, "I would give everything I have, all my money, my house, my career, my cars, everything for the chance to hug my mother one last time. Once you lose your mom, you'll understand. Listen to Mitch, call and hug your mom." So on Monday's show that I dropped early in the morning, I was like, hey, shout out to all the moms out there. Happy Mother's Day. And I read this comment, and I saw how many people liked it. I saw how many people also commented on it. And it felt like, for somebody to say something like this, you got to be comfortable with the people that you're around. So Celtic Raider, I feel you, man, and I think a lot of people out there felt this message as well. But if you don't think that we're more than a YouTube channel, we're building an amazing community, comments like this, I hope prove it to you. Let's keep it moving here on why I think Isaiah Pola-Mao is on the hot seat, presented by PrizePicks. You got a brand new regime, and I know SpyTech was a part of this organization last season. I've talked to a few people that I personally trust, and I can't say with 100% clarity what I'm about to say is 100% true, but I have gotten some wink, wink, nudge, nudges that Isaiah Pola-Mao getting the contract extension that he did last year was more of a Pete Carroll move, more so than a John SpyTech move. And if you remember, he hit the open market last year. The Raiders gave him a 2-year extension worth somewhere around a little over $8 million, but Kubiak's got no ties to Isaiah Pola-Mao. And The reason why I could actually see like this report happening in terms of not saying like Spytek was totally against it. I think Spytek was more like, all right, I got Pete Carroll. Pete Carroll has always done a great job working in the secondary. I'm going to trust Pete, and if Pete wants to bring back a guy in our secondary that he believes in, then I'm going to do it. But then I also look at how that season went, and I also wonder, did Pete just put his USC beer goggles on and say, oh, that guy was a USC Trojan? I want to bring that guy onto my roster. And I hate the fact that I'm doing that because it makes it sound like I don't like Isaiah Pola-Mao, the player. But there is just that little bit of just underlining frustration of like we told all y'all for months last year, and you didn't even try to change anything. You kept putting Isaiah in a bad situation. Week 1, week 2, week 3, it went on for the entire year, and now you have a player that I thought was trending in the right direction, getting better and better and better and better, and now he's in the final year of his contract with the Raiders. I don't know if he's going to be back next season. And if I'm looking at Isaiah and the sample size that I've seen from John Spytek, if all I can turn on is the 2025 tape, yeah, I mean, I wouldn't be shocked at all if they moved on from that player. But if you use him the way that you should, put him up in the freaking box, let him play against the run a little bit more, the way that he did in 2024, 2023, 2022, then yeah, he's going to be a good player. Let's go to the final reason here of why I think he's going to be on the hot seat. Money. And you can say a lot of things, a lot of times shit points back to money. But the fact that when you see the Raiders' moves in free agency, you see the moves in the draft, and now you're looking at the money standpoint, whether you cut them, whether you trade them, you can save $4.1 million. I would be unbelievably pissed off if the Raiders cut Isaiah Pola-Mao to save $4.1 million because he's not a player that you cut. He's just not a player that you cut. But the trade is where I think it gets interesting. If the Raiders were to trade him, you could trade him, you could save 4.1, and you'd be able to use that money and honestly put that in some other spots. But the fact that he's going to be a free agent, the fact that the money's easily moved on from, because the Raiders did what they did, that's telling me everything that's kind of already in the works here for Isaiah and for this Raiders defense. Now, could Pola-Mao prove me wrong? Yeah, and I hope that he does. I hope that he does prove that he can be a free safety. I hope that he does prove that he can cover better in the secondary, because if he shows that he can cover better in the secondary with the length that he has and the athletic ability that he has, and I know for a fact that he's a really hard-working guy, people love him in that locker room, but like, you got to be able to use a player in the correct way. So here's why I believe Isaiah Pola-Mao is on the hot seat going into this year, and I agree with what ESPN said. Look at what the Raiders did in free agency. They told you right away they don't like their secondary. They traded for Taron Johnson. You go out and you sign Eric Stokes. But I think that they did that because they had a plan about the NFL draft. They were all in on trading Stokes. And then, hell, they even traded up for his buddy Dalton Johnson in the 5th round. He's coming off the worst year of his career. He was literally ranked 98 out of 98 safeties, according to PFF, with a 30.2 overall coverage grade. You got a brand new regime with Clint Kubiak, and based on what Spytek saw last year, I wouldn't be shocked if they were like, you know what? We got to be able to figure out what we got in this guy because the money says that he's a free agent next year, and if you move on from him, you can save $4.1 million. I love the player Isaiah Pola-Mao, but you got to use him as a box safety. You can't use him as a free safety, and that's why he is no doubt on the hot seat. If you agree with everything that I just said, I hope that you hit that like button because Isaiah, there might be a 1% chance you see this video, but I hope that you do know I do believe in you as a player. I do think Isaiah is a hell of a football player. And if we're trying to get this thing going in the right direction, you just got to start understanding the talent you have and how to properly use that talent. If the Raiders use Isaiah Pola-Mao as that third safety and they line him up in the box, they put him near the line of scrimmage, and they use his talents to his strength, I guarantee you're going to go back and you're going to see that guy that Raider Nation fell in love with back in 2024, back in 2023, back in 2022 when you made the roster as a UDFA.